In pre-production, this is when you essentially start planning what the look and feel of the game is. We call it concept art, storyboarding, start creating the 2D concept. This is like the key art. So when you start game development, you first need to have game design. So we have here our designer. Essentially, he's in charge of creating the wireframes, all of the prototypes, all of the documentation related to the game. Mechanics as well, core mechanics. So you see here all of the references that we have, that we would essentially mechanics, different art, aesthetics. Finally, in the last leg of game design, you would need proof of concept. Proof of concept, or POC, is you would create a rough of the design or how you would essentially assemble it in a mind map. Then you have storyboarding and animation. So essentially, these guys are in charge of creating a 2D concept first. So when you create a 2D concept, this is when you essentially create the previs, the character design. So this is essentially illustration, so rough illustrations of different enemies, different characters. Then from there, we decide from what the final look would be for the character. Another example of pre-visualization is like animation, just illustration of different characters, character design yet again. So right now we're going to take a look at modeling, animation, and rigging. So we have here environment, essentially, checking all of the models with relation to props, different shaders as well, different textures. So that's what's involved in terms of environment. And then we have here modeling for characters specifically. So there are a few tools that we use. We use ZBrush, Maya, Blender for the modeling of the characters. In terms of detailing, we use ZBrush, but it's also could be done in Blender and Maya. When you're creating games in production, and then from there you start modeling the characters, you start designing based on the 2D concept. And then from there you start creating the code. So depending on the system architecture that you have decided, depending on the game design that you've decided during pre-prod, you would start creating that in production. So that's when you start coding different behaviors, different mechanics inside of the game. So if we go over here in the production area, so these guys are essentially responsible for applying all of the art assets and animation into the game engine. So this is also where we start doing the programming for the game. In game development, you have a team of programmers and you have a team of people, game developers as well, that essentially implements the art into the engine. They check for any issues, they check for any errors. That's the sort of stuff that we do. So here, you'll see how the process is for VFX. So you see here the animation, the character swinging his sword, and the effects that happen on top of that inside of the game engine. You start integrating the art, the animation, and then the programming all together into one specific product, or a first vertical slice. So you have your programming, your 3D modeling, your animation, and then everything else in one layered cake. You would need to taste test your cake, meaning you would need to QA if it actually tastes good in the first place. So this is one example of how game developers would test their game inside of the game engine. So you see here, this is essentially portrait. It's a mobile app. So meaning you would need to have a group of people or a section in your company or a group of friends just to test your game. If there's any bugs, let's say there's any visual glitches in the app if it's a mobile game, if there's any game-breaking issues, like for example exploits, like you can press a button or you do certain combinations in the game and it can break the game. Then lastly, the fourth section is publishing your game, shipping it. In my job, there's a lot of technicalities that you would need to know. So specifically as the Chief of Game Development, I need to dabble a bit in terms of how modeling take that into account into game development, how I should test it, that sort of stuff. The job is very difficult because you would need to explore different areas as well aside from game development.